Today I'll be answering some questions which have been put to me many times before. And after that I'll continue on, and together, jointly, we'll go on to answer them. The questions are these. Why do you live in a cave? And what is the purpose for you living in a cave? Actually, I like these questions quite a lot. They're questions that are important for all humanity. They incline in the direction of the profound. They're questions that come to the heart of the matter. They probe into the human predicament. If we can deal with these questions properly, if we can get a hold of them and deal with them fully, I feel that at the end of this conversation, this dialogue between spiritual brothers and sisters where you and I are both participating, I feel that at the end of this, there'll be enough energy generated to stimulate you to proceed along on your own path of spiritual progress. And that's the important thing. That's the reason we're meeting here today. What we're talking about is essential. It's important for all human beings to understand what our priorities are. What is it we're here to do? Why do we live as we do? Why do we live in the spaces that we live in? And we have to proceed from where we're at, don't we? Our next step begins right here. A journey of 1,000 miles begins in the next step. We proceed and we take off. Our point of departure is right here, right now. We can't depend on a future, even if there was such a thing, and there isn't. We really don't know what the circumstances in the future will be. We can't tell what it'll be 5 months from now, or 5 weeks, or even 5 minutes from now. We don't know how our health will be. We don't know how our life circumstances will be. So if we're going to live our life in a spiritual way, we begin it right now in the present moment. We don't procrastinate. We begin from right here. And it doesn't really matter where you're starting from. Some of you perhaps are watching this from inside a federal prison in Kentucky, or a hospital ward in Montana, or a condominium in Florida, or a penthouse in Tahiti or Rio de Janeiro. Luxury isn't a very suitable or fortunate circumstance either. But we begin from right here, right now. This is the point of departure. So for the first moments of this dialogue, in this documentary we're having together, in this old age questions using new age format, I'd like to invite you to look at my cave. Some people will call it a cave, and some people will call it a sanctuary. Those with religious inclinations or spiritual perspectives will see this as a sanctuary. And I think perhaps you will too at the end of this short time we have together. So, if you will, kindly come and follow me along. When we come to look at a cave, first thing we see is that it's a completely natural formation. It's a gift, really, a gift of Mother Nature. And because it's a gift of Mother Nature, it's ideal for contemplation, an ideal setting, an ideal situation for reflection, for seeing how the mind is and who we are really. A cave, a forest, or a desert draws out of us a sense of undercurrents, subconscious streams of energy which are crucial to our understanding of the dilemma called living a life, which we're all involved in, like it or not. People have sought out these kinds of places since this species stepped out beyond mere animal survival and evolved into what we now call humanity. People have sought out these spaces, spaces like these, spaces which evoke the sacred and produce a sense, a feeling of radical solitude. To live in the midst of nature where almost nothing is man-made is to be in a primal world, something similar to the feeling of being in a womb. Perhaps we could say the womb of the same mother, Mother Nature. There's this feeling of intimacy. It feels right and it feels natural to be in nature here. There's no feeling of loneliness or isolation as you might expect. And those of you who've done a lot of camping know this feeling as well. It's like when you just walk off into the forest on your own, then stop, look up at the sky or down at the ferns around an old tree. Everything feels right. Everything feels in harmony. In nature there is blending. There is a merging. Everything just fits. In a cave, a forest, or a desert, we don't bump into right angles or straight lines or flat, hard edges, nor do we encounter concrete blocks or plastic doors. Everything fits together more as a mosaic or a mandala than as a set of building blocks or an erector set. To live here, one doesn't so much have to adapt in the way that we do, say, in a modern building. Things are as they are. We need only learn to enter into it, to become a part of it, to yield to it. I personally am impressed and amazed by the incredible intentionality which pushes out these forms. Forms like this one, and forms like the one you're wearing. You know we're embodied creatures, don't you? We're one sort in a system in which there are all sorts of different manifestations in different forms, different faces and different shapes in the sentient world of men and women, animals, bugs, insects, and the plant life realm. We're enclosed, we're locked into a system which has over 3 million known different forms, different species on this planet, just at least 3 million that we know. Each of them represents a particular strategy designed to enhance the possibility for survival and evolution in this particular planet, on this earth. This form, and your form, and my cameraman's form, we're all manifestations of the forms pushed out by nature through an energy we call kamma, or karma. The intelligence of this intentionality which temporarily pushes out form into this world is known as kamma. Here in the stalactites and the stalagmites, we can see all we need to know, all we need to realize. Well, what could I be pointing to when I make a statement like that? Well, what I'm saying is that we see anything in a full, a whole, and a direct way, in a manner in which we're fathoming what we're looking at. We're seeing the essence, we're coming to the roots, not just the ordinary kind of superficial and surface kind of looking. If we look in that way, in that mature manner, a subtle, special understanding evolves, similar in kind to what we might have if we were reading the Tao Te Ching or the I Ching or our favorite mystical poetry on a cool winter Sunday morning. Something special, some special profound way of seeing opens up. We see the world in a totally new way, in a fresh, a simple, and a whole way. And then this fascinating, intriguing world which is set before us just opens up, and we see things without the proliferations, without our hopes, without our anxieties, without our fears. We see things as it is before we added all these extra ingredients and compounded and made our life complex. And the world returns to its original thingness, or its no-thing specialness. So that's what I mean when I say if we look at these and we see these in the proper, full way, we come to see their essence, to know them for what they are. Notice the spaces here. We can see spaces everywhere if we look carefully. But the thing is, we don't normally look at spaces. We're so heavily conditioned to look only at forms that we overlook the spaces. But spaces actually are almost all there is. The world is empty, but for a bit of temporary form here and there. And actually that form is quite empty also. But it certainly appears to be different. So in a natural setting, we can revise the way we look out. We look out into the world. We can turn our attention to the spaces, the minute permutations between things, the patterns and cycles in nature. This is a new way to look, and a much better one. By bringing our attention to the spaces between things, like this, in this kind of way, in this fashion, we're able to break the dominating authority of the familiar, which then goes on and fashions the world into a distorted reality. It's mostly a culturally contrived reality, a personal, private reality. And we become, we might say, a cult of one. As we explore the spaces between things, the mind clears and we experience what I call the ah of nature. This is just from letting go of the things that are clinging to the mind, which fasten themselves to our mind. The eyes brighten, our eyes brighten, and our jaws relax, and the sound ah gently oozes out of the heart. This isn't a vocal sound, it's the sound of the non-analytical consciousness. And when this ah-ness is present, we realize our true relationship to all the different phenomena in the world. That relationship is always the same. It's symbiotic, whole, and harmonious. But we can feel it in our bones, we can feel it in our heart. We can feel a connection to a long ago past, which modern people don't really have much appreciation nor regard for any longer. We don't even study history. We leave that up to the historians, as if history was a superfluous, insignificant event which had no bearing on the present. But the truth is that we need to be connected. We need to be connected to our heritage, our history. Old formations like Stonehenge and the pyramids and the old cities of Siam, they draw us to them. I make a practice of noticing the folds in form, like looking here, looking at these primordial formations. You can see the folds. You can actually even see the fractalization, the kind of freeze-dried feeling of liquid density frozen in time and space. This must be the way Tai Chi looks like when you slow it down and reduce it to the level of an electron microscope. These spaces we see here in the cave or in any natural situation, are particularly good contemplation for slowing down fast trackers, the Speedy Gonzales types who are too much on the front burner, and if they don't get off, they're going to blow up. To enter into space and let go of our addiction to form is quite a letting go and quite a profound practice. And you can observe that when you're in contact with nature, there's really nowhere to go. You're already there. You're where you need to be. This is it. And that nagging, wanting this and that all the time vanishes. I find this environment really beautiful. There's a sense of delight in the heart when we look at something lovely and beautiful such as this. Something wondrous, something just so pleasant that the heart feels gladness and delight. And here at nature we're looking at something beautiful, directly into a wondrous scene, a lovely scene. It's beautiful, and that's undeniable. But on the other hand, and to keep things in their proper perspective, beauty is not so much a consideration of physical environment as it is an environment in the mind, a psychological environment. Beauty, as we've all discovered, is in the eyes of the beholder. And it's dependent on a preformed, a prejudged, or a prejudiced idea as to what is and what is not beautiful. We need to learn to look through and beyond beauty, not to be stuck and submerged in it. There are some significant factors which nature turns us on to or tunes us into. And when we're settled into a natural and ordinary way of seeing the world, spiritual understanding arises on its own. In Buddhism, we call this spiritual understanding insight. When insight arises, the mind transforms itself automatically into more constructive ways of acting and behaving in the world. These insights are no small thing. They have tremendous power to rebalance our attitudes and underlying assumptions. They stick like mud pies on a schoolhouse wall, if you can relate to that. Usually, in the midst of our daily life, we're spinning around so quickly that we just bounce off of things, and things just bounce off of us, unobserved. And this is quite unfortunate. Inconsequential things come into our life and we totally miss them. Even worse than that, in fact, something that's catastrophic is that we totally miss the consequential things. Nature has the power to help remedy this. Natural spaces counteract our tendency to forget and to dismiss. Therefore, it's the most useful and the most profound space for humans to inhabit. That's why we're so interested, all of us, in preserving the forests and supporting animal and bird life and coral reefs and rivers and all the other ecosystems which are necessary if this planet is going to continue to be a suitable environment for human habitation. Organizations which are established in order to preserve and encourage the biosphere are to be commended. Organizations like World Wildlife and the Audubon Society or the Audubon Society, or the Organization for the Reestablishment of the Tibetan people back into their homeland, the people who protect and compassionately have looked after their forest and their animal life for centuries. These people are to be commended. These organizations are to be supported. The world is waking up to the need to take care of this fragile planet. Notwithstanding the fact that I've been talking about all kinds of important spiritual reasons for living in a cave, some of you are bound to want to follow up your first question with this one as well. Well, visiting a cave is obviously a good thing to do, an opportunity to enjoy the wonders and the beauty of nature. Don't you think there's such a thing as overdoing it, or too much nature? I can understand this question as well. If someone has grown up and lived around big cities and their experience with nature has been limited to, say, day trips to national parks and zoos, then their experience has been a bit sterile. Indeed, I can relate to that because that was the extent of my contact with nature when I was a layman 15, 16 years ago. Our need and our relationship to places and spaces in our life depends on what we see as a purpose in our life. Completely in the ordinary world, if we're completely immersed in the ordinary everyday world where ambition and striving for success is where we are looking to find happiness, then we're going to be involved in the material world and we're going to be looking for success and power. In that case, being in nature can be healing and revitalizing, even if it's just for a few days. It's a skillful way to charge one's batteries and go back to the world afresh. And this is a good thing to do. But supposing your purpose is other, a much more noble one. It's to conduct a spiritual experiment or a religious experiment on yourself. With yourself is that which is being experimented on, not looking at guinea pigs or monkeys or rats or anything, but actually experimenting with that which needs to be experimented with yourself, to see for yourself the way things are. If that's the case, and that's where your needs lie, you're going to need to enter into a long relationship with nature, with Mother Nature, a marriage of sorts. Because the path of spiritual unfolding is a natural unfolding and can only be a natural unfolding, we need to live close and in harmony with nature, at least in the beginning. Nature, then, as I would characterize it, is an aspect of what's necessary to have as a background in your life. We can call it the original easy listening station. Once established in a natural environment, we're going to feel a sense of calming and cooling down. The tension which has become habitual, we find in our shoulders and our neck and our jaws. These are the places where the problems in our life come up. This is where the source of irritation and hatred and jealousy and fear all begins to come out from us. And we can drop all that. It's possible to let go of all that. And if we can, and if we learn how to do that, we're going to feel a lot lighter and happier and far more alive. So why am I here? Why am I living in this cave? Because it's cooling and because it's calming. There are many things one has to put up with when they live in this kind of environment, in a raw environment like this. But that's just the way it is, isn't it? One must enter into spiritual practice with enough resolve and enough determination to meet and overcome all challenges. If there weren't all kinds of challenges put in front of us, there really wouldn't be much happening. It really wouldn't be the right track. We'd be off the mark. Why am I doing this? What is my purpose? I live like this in order to develop and to maintain a spiritual life in the most resolute fashion that I'm able to maintain, so that the possibility, indeed the probability, of reaching the fruit of nibbana, of enlightenment, is available and in front of me. I'd like to talk about 4 or 5 aspects of spiritual practice which will be of use to you all. Taken together, they expand on the questions that we've been dealing with. What is my purpose for living in the cave? And indeed, what is any spiritual seeker's purpose in living in an environment such as this, in an inwardly inclined lifestyle? There are 5 aspects which I'll talk to. Since they all begin with S, we'll deal with them together. Slowing down, solitude, silence, stark simplicity, and sacredness. Slowing down. When we embrace the idea of slowing down and live with solitude and in silence, we do so in order to come to that which is most important to us, to allow that which is actually apparent, which we miss, to jump into the foreground and come out of the background. Usually the most important inner voices, those which are our most significant teachers, are trampled upon, run over by the chaos of everyday life. But if we give ourselves some psychological room where the mind doesn't continually run into the same hardcore stuff, we find that the mind turns towards that which it needs to understand. The mind, our mind, turns around and begins to look inward. It reflects upon the matters involved in this dilemma of living a human life, and the reason we have a body and a mind in the first place. It reflects on the fact that we're born. And this is an event which we need to really acknowledge deeply, an event we should contemplate often, sit on and think about, not from just one side, but from every potential side you can think of, and as many angles as you're able to, but from every potential side you can think of, and as many angles as you're able to, until we begin to realize the implications of that extraordinary fact. We're born, and because of that we get ill. We get old, and we die. Just like the sound of the crickets. They were born, they go through the middle of their life, and they die. The same as we do. In the midst of this inevitable, difficult-to-escape pattern, we notice that there is mostly conflict and disharmony. Don't we? Does your life run smoothly? I think probably the answer is not too smoothly. Some patches of this disharmony are quite noticeable and quite painful. But much of it is so familiar. We become so dulled and so immune that we don't even see the pain or recognize the feeling of pain in our hearts. It's just become ordinary. When our mind is in touch with the way things are, we know what's going on within us and going on outside of us. We're with the way things are. We function in the rhythm of nature. So that here, at the end of the day, we realize and acknowledge that this day is moving into the transition which we call night. Night follows day, and day follows night, and night follows day, and so on. This sounds quite simple, but actually if you really understood it, you'd be an extremely wise person. All that which began will fade away and end. Therefore, regardless of anything else that may be occurring in any moment, we can be certain that each and every moment is a moment of change. Albert Einstein, even though a brilliant theoretical physicist and mathematician, once synthesized all his understanding of the world into just this: everything is changing, which is what the ancient meditation masters have been teaching for thousands of years, and they didn't even have a postdoc. When was the last time you allowed yourself to just be, to be in the flow of nature? So much so that you could just sit quietly by while the sun slid silently over the horizon. Here, as I light the candles and the incense, I reflect on wisdom and purity. Buddha's practice is a path of purification which leads into the field of wisdom and compassion. That which makes this journey challenging is the interference of the I, ego, which we continually mistake for a real, permanent, unchanging entity. But it isn't that at all. It is a continuously changing phenomena. And in the quiet of the night, we can catch a glimpse of this fact and see it as an object for contemplation. We're not a stable, continuous personality. That's just a temporary condition. If we continue to think in this mistaken way, then of course we're going to get into all manner of difficulty. We need to work to free ourselves from this who we think we are syndrome. Meditation, that is, walking, sitting, standing, and lying down, are the postures in which we're obliged to meditate. These are the postures which human beings continually must shift into. Just these. We practice observing these postures in our meditation periods and in our daily life, trying not to miss any moments, not to sacrifice any opportunities. Also, the breath is an important tool in this work. There's breath, and for those of you who have yet to explore meditation, you'll find this fact is more significant and more profound than it appears to be. Breath and life are one and the same. Watching the breath, the transition between the material and the ethereal, is an excellent way to meditate. Through diligent observation of the breath, the mind settles and the waking up process begins. In meditation, we always have to ask ourselves, what am I intending to do in this moment? Because without intention, without determination, the mind will just flop around here and there and follow its own inclinations, its own patterns of thoughts, its own ways, its own fantasies, its own desires. There won't be any sharpness in the mind to control the mind, because that will be a mind that doesn't yet have mindfulness awareness. When we input mindfulness awareness, we take control of our mind. We add reflective consciousness. We see the contents of the mind as an object. That means we don't just fall into the stream of consciousness and drown in a sea of unawareness. So in the practice of insight meditation, we're developing, cultivating the mind to see what's going on as an observer, a dynamic participant, not just falling into a trance induced by the various bait which the mind presents to us. So my job here in this cave as a meditator is to continue to observe the movements, the games, and the various different baits offered to me without falling for any of it, without biting into the bait and getting stuck on the hook. Of course, this is not easy. The practice of meditation invites the constant and continuous awareness and alertness and awakefulness that a whole happy human being must have. The practice of meditation invites constant and continuous alertness, awareness, and awakefulness. This is demanding work, but on the other hand, the rewards are great. The mind is brighter, lighter, more awake, more intelligent, and more compassionate. Try this for yourself. There are a couple of useful contemplations which I often ponder several times in a day. They help to remind me of the human situation. They bring things more into focus when things get hazy. We human beings are animated, complex, self-willed, self-regulating organisms. And we're living in a changeable, continuously changing environment. Because of this, we have quite a bit of freedom. But you see, that freedom exists in the midst of duty and obligation, both to ourselves and to the society. The external and internal environment is constantly changing because of cold and heat and damp and humidity and all different kinds of weather conditions. So we're constantly needing to adjust and to adapt. This is the second point. As I see it, the fact that we must continually adapt and change in this manner is an indication that we really don't belong here. I mean, really don't belong here. This is not our real home, not the external world, nor this body.